Let's start our time value of money basics in dealing with the formulas with future value. It's the one that I find to be the easiest because it really uses left to right thinking, which is in concert with the way that we read. And so I find it much easier. So I've got the process copied over here to the right and the simple problem over here. And I'm going to read it twice, once out loud and once in my head. What is the future value of $100 invested for 10 years at 10%? Having read it twice now, let's go ahead and move to part two, which is documenting your assumptions. And so whenever I put the assumptions down, what I'm thinking about is just writing down and labeling what I know. So for example, I'm asking for a future value, which to me, I can just go ahead and label as a question mark because I'm not sure what I'm looking for. But when I see $100 invested, I know immediately that means a present value. And I'm going to go ahead and put that in as $100. And then I'm going to label that as the accounting format. Then I see I want to know in 10 years, which we would call the number of periods, which for us is going to be an annual number of periods. And then I see a rate of 10%, which I'm going to put in as a decimal and then make into the percentage format. And then I too am going to qualify by making that rate annual. And one thing I want to remind us is when you see a rate, rates without labels are annual. A rate would have to be listed 10% daily or 10% weekly for it to be not annual. Let's go ahead and put a breaker bar in here just so that we can have a little separation. And then let's go ahead and solve using the Excel formulas and functions. You're going to get used to doing this regularly. So for the first time here, I'm just going to type it so you can get into the rhythm. It's always present value, future value, payment, rate, and numbers of periods. Those are the abbreviations that we use that worked in concert with our formulas that we discussed in the notes, as well as the cash flows that feed those formulas through the variables. So while we're doing this, I'm going to go ahead and just do a little point and pick. So I'm going to start with present value as equals and just highlight that 100 for the time being. I'm looking to solve for future value, so I'm going to make that bold and I'm going to put a yellow highlight. And then I'm going to make sure that all of my numbers that I have in these first three are labeled as accounting. Then I like to make sure that these values are in a light blue to indicate that that period has to be updated for us to be synchronous between all three of them. So when I don't see a payment up here, it's okay for me to put a 0, but I saw up ahead how the rate was annual. So let's go ahead and requalify that as the annual rate. And then let's just use an equals and point and find the rate of 10%. Then the same thing with periods. I saw that the number of periods was annual. So let's qualify that by making it an A and then point and pick. This is then 10 years. Now, the way we're going to do the formula in this one is the basic navigation of formulas, financial, and then all of these variables here are also consequently named for the abbreviations of the formulas, like FV is one of the formulas that I can select right here. And I get a dialog box that allows me to then just point and pick with a 10% rate of return and a number of periods equal to 10. When I have no payment, and when I have a present value of 100, and I don't need to worry about type, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK there, and then notice that it changed this into, off of the home page, currency, which is annoying. I had already set it up as accounting, so let's reset it up as accounting. But look at this here. It gave me a negative number, which doesn't make a ton of sense to me, which is now on to point 4, the presentation of the numbers. If this is how I wanted to present this question by saying, what does $100 grow into in 10 years at 10%? One of the ways I could overcome that is just by putting my cursor in front of the F and FV and hitting a minus sign there and then hitting enter. Notice it's still in currency, so let's go back and make it accounting again. And now it makes a little more sense in terms of saying $100 in 10 years at 10% grows into 259.37. And so the interpretation of my results would be if I needed about $260 in 10 years and I could invest in something that is going to earn a 10% rate of return, I would need to put away $100 right now. So let me just add a note to here, which was switch the sign to align the presentation of the number to the narrative. And that is the basic way we handle future value.